They have to end. We have to move quickly. And that means eliminating all the bureaucracy.
Because it's finally based on what we've heard from them. And our own frustration also as a government that things are not going fast enough. And the frustration sometimes also the Canadian forces that they don't have access to what is required to really do their job.
Gang, what's up? Aaron here, Canadian Looney. Smash that like, hit subscribe. Let's get straight into the video. Canadian federal politics are absurd. Let's kick it off.
Firms, I wonder, to just sort of set the stage, how do you define a Canadian firm? Like, will the big American companies that are here manufacturing in Ontario, for example, do they count as Canadian in this calculation?
So in the strategy, we're proposing that when basically the content of a given procurement is at 70% made in Canada, that would make then a Canadian company. And so that's the idea. But this is a proposal, and we're, of course, working with industry. In the next couple of weeks, we'll be, of course, setting exactly what are the guidelines. But what we're doing in the strategy is, here's what we heard, here's what we're proposing, and we need to make sure that we all agree. But the goal is fundamentally, we want to give contracts to Canadian companies to have a real Canadian industrial sovereignty. We want to be able to create 125,000 jobs, like you said, and our goal is ultimately to regain a lot of these industrial capabilities that over time, Peter, we actually did invest in. And a lot of our Canadian companies have been very good at exporting. They've actually been able to convince many governments around the world to buy their products. I'm thinking of Diavelin, Bombardier, CAE, I'm thinking obviously of Rochelle, etc. But they have been complaining that they haven't been able to convince the Canadian government and Canadian Armed Forces. And that needs to change. It's an entire culture change that we're coming up with. It's our first defense industrial strategy in recent history. And this is actually to take care of our own.
I want to get to that export capacity issue because the permitting is a really big part of this. But just to circle back to make sure, you talked about CAE and some of these big Canadian companies. When you talk about a Canadian company, are we also talking about General Dynamics, like the American companies that have manufacturing capacity in Canada? Do they count under this calculation?
Well, the idea is for when, for example, GDLS in London or, of course, Bell Textron and Mirabel are building here at home with IP developed in Canada that is actually transferred to our Canadian forces. That's what we're valuing. That's what we want, basically, to support.
And lots of Canadian employment through those. I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on it.
Of course.
The numbers, not just the $6.6 billion being invested here, but the investment that's expected to be drawn in to the industry as a result of this strategy. $180 billion in defense procurement, $290 in defense-related infrastructure, $125 billion in downstream economic activity. That's like $500 billion in investment over 9 years. What makes you think that's doable?
Well, first, of course, we will be investing 2% of our GDP minimum by the end of the year. And then all NATO countries have agreed that it would be 5%. So 3.5% of our GDP in defense and 1.5% in basically dual-use infrastructure. And we need to make sure that we abide by that plan. This is the goal that all NATO countries have set for all European and basically us and the US. And so we know that's the goal. We know that's the objective. Now we won't just sit idle and invest in different and companies and just allocate different contracts without thinking that we should use this important investment to really create opportunities here in Canada. Because this is happening at a time of very chaotic geopolitics. This is happening at a time of a trade war, and we need to be able to protect jobs in the steel sector, in the aluminum sector, in the auto sector, basically in advanced manufacturing, a sector that has been very much affected by the tariffs. And at the same time, we need to be able to create new jobs. So we think that this strategy is so important, yes, for our Canadian forces, our strong men and women protecting us and keeping the world as a peaceful place. But at the same time, we think that this is something that this industrial strategy can be used as an economic stimulus to help a lot of the sectors that are so key to so many regions of the country.
Getting this done, though, is going to depend on a couple of really key things. And the complaints we heard, we've been waiting for this for a while, and the complaints we heard heading into it were twofold. One, making sure we sorted out, as you mentioned, the export capacity, the permitting that allowed these companies to export these products to other countries that sometimes Canadians, some do, some don't, have issues with. The other, though, was sort of process and government departmental overlap. There's a line that Philippe Lagacé flagged in his Substack post saying, even with more efficient defense procurement, Canadian companies will still need to engage with multiple agencies. Why not sort out that government overlap? It feels in a way like we might just have one new layer of bureaucracy added into the mix here.
I don't agree with that. Actually, we're streamlining the process. And the best example is the submarine deal. The submarine contract of 12 submarines is coming at a pace and, based on a lot of the industrial benefits coming out of this procurement. And basically, it's a pace that we've never seen. It's going fast. We now have 2 proponents, and we hope that we can finalize that deal in the coming months. We now have the Defense Investment Agency, which will be in charge. We have now a new president, we have a Secretary of State for military procurement, and that Defense Investment Agency will be in charge of procurement and will be in charge of making sure that there's no overlap, that things go quicker, that there's less red tape, and that there's actually also better trust between Canadian forces that have real capability needs and at the same time industry that has so much to offer. So that's my first point. To your question regarding exports,
right.
As I mentioned in this interview, we believe that our companies have already a lot of export credentials. They've been around the world. They've seen what other governments have done. And it was finally time for Canada to get on board and make these investments in our own industrial sector and really recreate the defense sector. But of course, we believe also in our policy of human rights, and we'll continue to abide by it. And that is why we know that we can continue to do that, open new markets, because we're now part of the SAFE agreement with Europe, because we're closer also to countries such as Japan and Korea, and because also we believe that our companies have already a lot of experience around the world. So it's basically a win-win.
But I mean, I hear you, and I think a lot of the companies that are listening now will say, well, that's great, but that has not been our experience with your government, with this Liberal government over the last 10 years. And frankly, in governments before them, that export capacity has been hindered, and it has been strung up in red tape time and time again. What specific actions can you and can this government and can these new agencies take to try to make sure that this time, famous last words, are different?
Well, because now we have a defense industrial strategy, period. Your entire question is linked to the plan that the government is presenting, Peter. So, and that's why also so many companies are reacting so positively and the industries are so happy with it, because it's finally based on what we've heard from them. And our own frustration also as a government that things are not going fast enough. And the frustration sometimes also the Canadian forces that they don't have access to what is required to really do their job. So we were able to put everybody together, make sure that we have a really good plan, and finally be able to deliver. And I must say, we didn't wait for the defense industrial strategy to happen. What happened is, meanwhile, we signed a SAFE agreement with Europe for defense procurement. We were able to invest and do a new partnership with the European Space Agency and invest $500 million to open markets for companies in that sector. We were able to buy 6 new jets from Bombardier. We were able also to open $4 billion of capital through the BDC for small and medium-sized companies across the country that want to enter that important sector, which is defense. So things are being put in place. We're coming up with key procurements, 12 submarines, 15 river-class destroyers, 6 polar icebreakers, a major communication satellite contract, another one regarding ammunitions, another one linked to, of course, fighter jets, and another one regarding training for fighter jets. So a lot of investments, a lot of different procurements. My colleagues, Minister of Defense and the Secretary of State for Defense Procurement, are in charge of this. My job is to make sure that the industry is able to reap the benefits of it and we're able to create jobs. And that's what we'll do.
Various experts have flagged that sort of the strategy is one thing, but we need a proper defense policy. We need that as legislation. Can you do one without the other? And when can we expect to see more, like something legislatively on the table to move this along?
Well, the Defense Investment Agency legislation is actually in the Budget Implementation Act. So it's important that we stop the obstruction on the part of the Conservatives and that we are finally able to pass the Budget Implementation Act. It's important. And we need to make sure that we deliver. Canadians have no time for any form of obstruction. And so our goal is to make sure that we're moving ahead at a very fast pace.
All right, Minister, we'll have you back on and talk about this when we get more details as the results come in. So I appreciate making time
With
today.
pleasure. I'll always be there to answer your tough questions.
All right, thank you. Industry Minister
Thank you.
Melanie Joly. Prime Minister Mark Carney announced his plan today to overhaul Canada's defence industry. The goal is to build most of Canada's defence needs right here at home instead of buying them elsewhere.
We think that this strategy is so important, yes, for our Canadian forces, our strong men and women protecting us and keeping the world as a peaceful place. But at the same time, we think that this is something that this industrial strategy can be used as an economic stimulus to help a lot of the sectors that are so key to so many regions of the country.
Here.
Canadian federal politics are absurd. My name's Aaron. This is Canadian Looney. If you've enjoyed our video, smash the like, hit subscribe. That is it. Thank you all so much for watching. Get your Canadian federal politics right here. Ciao for now, gang. Catch you in the next one.